Ja, letzter Satz in Deutsch. Das nächste Panel geht tatsächlich über das, was zum Schluss besprochen wurde. Und wir werden es aufgrund der Internationalität unserer Gäste in Englisch machen. Und damit, I switch to English. Yeah, welcome everybody. So we just heard from Gunter Kegel and from our President Siegfried Russwurm how important it is to open a perspective not only for Europe, for Germany, but for the rest of the world to develop CO2 neutral value creation structures. And this is what we want to talk about today on this panel. We have a very distinguished international panel, and I would like to start with the lady. It's Sara Edmonson. So she's the European lead for Fortescue Industries, an Australian company which has made several headlines over the last few weeks and months here, not only in Germany, but globally. It is led by Andrew Forrest. Andrew Forrest had expressed its will to take part in this discussion, but unfortunately he was not available. But I know Sara Edmonson, and I'm very glad that she's with us. Fortescue is a classical company which is focused on iron ore and is part of this rather fossil Australian infrastructure, and therefore it's very remarkable what Andrew Forrest and his company is trying to do. Sara has a long and successful history in energy business, especially in Italy, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, here with me is Stijn van Els. He's the head of commercial delivery at the Port of Rotterdam. Sounds very technical. He had a long career with Shell. Many, of course, know him from his time here as the CEO of Shell Germany, but he has a lot more experience to that. And over the last years, he, especially in his tenure at Port of Rotterdam, he has taken up a very significant role in creating a global hydrogen economy, of course, focused on Rotterdam as a global hub for all of this. Thank you, Stijn, for joining us. Well, the third is Cornelius Matthes. Cornelius Matthes is the CEO of DII, Desert Energies, formerly known as Desertec. He has a long track record in investment and financing community, and he's now about to develop DII out of Dubai into new dimensions. I think he joins us from Dubai. Thank you, Cornelius, for being part of this panel. So last but not least, I would like to welcome Armin Schnettler. Armin is the CEO of Siemens New Energy Business at Siemens Energy, and he has probably the longest track record on future technologies and innovation in the technology sector, and he is dealing a lot with the question of green molecules and other energy innovations in the future. So, Armin, thank you for joining us. Well, now let's start. And I would like to start with Armin. Armin has you have a very remarkable career around energy technology, not only working for industry heavyweights like ABB and now Siemens, but you spent a very long period of your professional life on the very renowned RWTH in Aachen, which is sort of the Camelot of German manufacturing industry. And so my question to you is, from your perspective, over all these decades working on innovation and technology, what do you see? Where are the most dynamic trends, technological trends in this global process to develop a truly climate neutral global landscape? Where do you see the most dynamic trends right now?
Okay, Holger, thank you very much. Maybe first of all, before answering your question, which is a very difficult one, I used to be the CEO of the new energy business. So I'm now focusing on my, task as president of the VDE and doing a lot in the hydrogen field and focusing on innovations and the interface between, universities, academia, and industry. To your question, first of all, what do we need today and what is needed for the energy transition, of course, is green energy. And green energy today is based on green electricity. Even the green hydrogen field is based on green electrons, right? So talking about this and where's the highest dynamic, of course, over more than 20 years, we managed to increase the reliability and output of renewable energy sources out of wind turbines, out of PV panels and all of that, but also the integration into the system in order to keep the lights on, so to speak. So getting the cost down is the first major task. And the highest dynamic, what I see here is, of course, is the industrial scale, the growth, the amount of wind and solar energy. And from a technical perspective, it is offshore wind. I mean, here reliability and driving the costs down is extremely important. This is on the electron side. And the second one is which is more or less responsible or covering 50% of the final and global energy consumption are the green molecules, because we cannot, say, decarbonize all applications, all sectors by electrons only. So here I see the electrolyzers, say green hydrogen, green, say derivatives as extremely important. Of course, for that, we will talk about this, I believe, on markets, but technology is by far not where the maturity level should be in order to reach gigawatts and multiple gigawatt scale. So driving costs down, especially with technology on offshore and getting industrial scale on the electron side, and on the green molecules is the electrolyzer technology and further on. And the third topic is overall the system integration or the integration of all the consumers, the production, the different technologies in an energy system, not only electrical power systems, in an energy system. So we need to focus on energy system designs and planning rather than electrical and gas and all of that separately. So just as a, as a start here.
Yeah, I would like to ask the same question to you, Stijn. So you, of course, spend a lot of time in the heart of the oil major business. You have a long experience with LNG and other things, all the fossil stuff. So where do you see the biggest developments over the last years, especially with the companies you've been working for and this sector of today's fossil industry?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think, as the previous speaker, as Amrin said, a lot of developments are happening in the electrical side of the house. And a lot of developments are also happening in the production and the use and the conversion of hydrogen or electrons into hydrogen. I've opened up quite some hydrogen retail sites in Germany over my years here. And it was always nice to have a speech and say, this costs us another €1 million and it won't make any money. But we only do this because of the bigger picture. And stuff that is currently happening goes much faster than I've ever hoped for and thought for, because many people have come to the conclusion that we firstly are serious about energy transition, that we're serious about being a part of it in Western Europe, and that the actual technological solution to this, and that it is, as you said before, it is possible, doable, and actually very interesting from an economic perspective. So we see at all these fronts, lots of business leaders now taking all sorts of action. So you see enormous amounts of brain power, capital, interest happening across the globe. And through the port of Rotterdam, we have many contacts with various players. So we're actually very excited about what is happening across the globe in all these elements, as Amrin Schnettler already highlighted.
Thank you. Well, Sara, I mean, Australia, we all know, is quite fossil. So it's iron ore, it's coal, it's LNG. And we all know that the Australian government had quite a hard time to create a position towards the COP26 conference. But we know that your company, especially your owner, your leader, Andrew Forrest, has really played a absolutely astounding role over the last few months on all of this. So could you explain us a little bit what are the assumptions and what is the mindset which takes Andrew Forrest and your company to go that tough on a green future?
Well, and that's a great way of summarizing it. He's very tough, and I think he very much played an intended instrumental role, I think, on building the consensus around the federal government, right, in setting a net zero target for 2050. I think what's interesting, though, is if you've got the headlines and then you've got the trend lines, and if you separate the two, you'll see that on the trend lines, You've actually got a lot of states. For example, Queensland is an excellent example, as well as New South Wales. But almost actually all of the states within Australia, as well as when you look down kind of more at the smaller businesses and industry, there's a real serious commitment for climate action. And in fact, most of those states and local governments and academia are part of something called the Net Zero Coalition, which is a real genuine commitment to getting carbon neutral, sometimes actually decades before the 2050 target. So I think that Andrew's personal drive is driven by this personal conviction, which was something that kind of occurred over a 6-year process as he went through a PhD in marine ecology. And started to understand the impacts of climate change on the ocean. And I think once he realized what was happening, it clearly drove him to start making a difference in his own world, which is ultimately Fortescue and then, our own mining operations. But it became very clear as we were, working through our decarbonization roadmap that if we were having this problem, then everyone's going to be having this problem. And the problem is effectively accessing green fuels. And on time and within the dates that are going to allow for decarbonization to meet those climate targets. So Andrew, clearly it's that personal journey, I think, which is what's led so much conversion, if you will, amongst a lot of the other sort of political leaders who were against moving in that direction. But we're starting to see that there's this undercurrent that's very much moving the entire country and the entire economy in that direction.
Thank you, Sara. So Cornelius, so your company was formerly known as Desertec. This was a great hope for Europe. So it was green energy from Africa, bringing it into Europe, great vision, great ideas, a lot of media attention, and then it somehow ended. But obviously it's still there. You are sitting in Dubai. You are since January the CEO of Desert Energy, DII, which is, of course, the former Desertec. So what changed? What do you see as a reason that DII is still in the game and is having big plans for the future?
Thank you, Holger, for having me. It's really a pleasure. Well, on your question, so 12 years ago, people were kind of not taking us serious. Oil and gas countries said renewables are not needed. Things dramatically changed. Obviously, Desertec went through waves from Desertec 1.0 to 3.0, and there have been many, many learnings alongside. And obviously, we are still learning every day. But what has changed is the reality that the region has led the global energy transition over the last few years. So the race to 1 cent solar and 1.5 cent wind was led, as a matter of fact, by the region, and specifically by Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Saudi Arabia most recently, but also big achievements in Morocco, where we are at 40% renewable energy today, solar and wind, or countries like Egypt with some of the world's largest solar and wind parks. So the last few years have really brought an amazing momentum. So, from laggards, here the countries have become leaders of the global energy transition. We have the lowest cost solar and wind here, and most notably a combined combined capacity factor of, in some instances, 70-80% combined solar and wind, which is perfect for green hydrogen. Now, we started 5-6 years ago with hydrogen, and again, people were not taking us serious, smiling at us. But over the last year or two, this has been really a revolution. So the country shifted massively, net zero announcement, like recently the UAE, Saudi Arabia, UAE now hosting COP28. But what has happened is really breathtaking also in terms of project announcements. And if you look at the energy transition and the strategic role green molecules play to complement green electrons, this is really amazing. In some instances like Mauritania, like Oman, single projects that were announced dwarf the entire energy system of the country. And there's a lot of serious things happening. You know, the Helios project in NEOM, more than 2,000 megawatts of electrolyzer capacity as a purely commercial project for green hydrogen and green ammonia. So that's really amazing. And well, you go to ADIPEC here, to Gastech, some of the largest global conferences in the traditional sector, which has not been so much my world personally. And there's only one topic, it's all about hydrogen. And the region, you know, has understood that this is the only way to move now to accelerate the energy transition, to go in really bold terms, because this is a matter of stability for the future here. It's, you know, the jobs that need to be repurposed from old to new industries. It's huge opportunities here to you know, to change the economies, to make them future-proof. So we are living in very, very exciting times, and Desertec 3.0 has been quite a remarkable success story. We had our annual event just the week before last with, you know, 300 international guests, and I think the names in the consortium and how it is made up internationally with 25 countries now, and also the who's who of the hydrogen industry. I think that's a sign of appreciation to the work of the team, and, you know, to the trust DI has built over the last 12 years in the region.
Yeah, thank you, Cornelius. Well, before we talk about markets, we have to talk about technology. So I would rather have a round on technology. Well, hydrogen is very often denounced as, oh, we already had one hype, so it's the next hype. I think with the global decision on climate neutrality or the European decision, I mean, this is a different game, because there's no emission spare budget left in a CO2 neutral target of 2050 or 2045. Therefore, this explains a lot why we have such a race for hydrogen. But today, everybody knows hydrogen, green hydrogen, is going to be much more expensive in the beginning. So what do we see? Where are the boundaries, and what do we have to do technology-wise to get hydrogen to become really the fossil-free, CO2-neutral alternative energy carrier of the future? Stijn, if you would like to start.
Yeah, I think some of the topics are very logical. The first is, of course, to get the cost of power of electricity, green electricity, down. Siemens, others are working very hard to make that possible. And there's an element of technological breakthrough still happening, but there's also an element of just scale, just massive industrial scale to get the cost down. Secondly, you have the same happening on the conversion technologies. Electrolysis of water is not new, has been around for very long, but if you do it 1,000 times as intensive as we currently do it, costs will come down, and you have all sorts of technological improvements needed in the manufacturing processes, in the detailed design processes, as well as in the conversion. Haber-Bosch and Fischer-Tropsch are all German scientists of about 100 years ago. So the basic patterns and principles have been understood. But when you talk to the current scientists, you say, but actually, in order to get another 5%, another 5%, another 20% down in the cost, we need to go back to the original science and evolve there. The third step is in transportation. We can transport methanol and ammonia. There's no problem at all. Transporting of liquid hydrogen has not been done before. It's been done now on a very small ship between Australia and Japan. But if you look back to what has happened on LNG, it started similarly, very small. So again, you have to apply common industrial sense to make these things happen. And then the last step is in the use. Lots of interesting applications being discussed in shipping, using methanol or ammonia as a fuel, in conversion of waste streams into feedstocks through pyrolysis or other chemical processes, using the new green hydrogen as another feedstock to produce, again, efficient new fuels and new materials for the society. So I think all across the value chain, we'll have to do, as I think has been said before, you have to move on all the fronts to make the progress needed.
Armin, Siemens, of course, has a look on every aspect. You have a good look into the science community. So where do you see the potential? Where is it going? And how much do we have to scale and enhance those technologies to create green molecules as the energy carrier of the future.
Yeah, Holger, I mean, Stijn already mentioned more or less everything which is relevant. So both on the power production side, getting costs down and operational hours up is important. Talking about the electrolyzer and say power to X technologies, here we are talking about, I mean, the CAPEX and the OPEX side, right? And the CAPEX, of course, is getting the initial cost down. Maybe in some applications even more condensed, more compact. This is very often contradictory to the efficiency, depending on the technology. So here we need to work on and lifetime, say, maintenance cost, OPEX going down. These are the, I would say, the major steps all are working on. The challenge here is we need to move from announcements to project execution. You know, we do a hell of a lot of work. We are investing in R&D, in demonstration, in pilot plants, but it's a huge difference if we are talking about a 1 megawatt or 10 megawatt or even a 20 megawatt application, or if you're talking about a 500, 600 or 1000 megawatt use for industrial scale, 8,000 hours a year or even more. These are two complete different worlds. And here, what we see on the technology side, there's, say, some kind of a challenge that we are working together with academia, with the universities, with research organizations on that, getting really, I mean, into the ingredients, so to speak, yeah, in the coatings and all of that. We should not underestimate the risk in project execution in doing these big projects, how to bring from an electrolyzer stack into an electrolyzer system in a big power to X plant. I see the biggest challenge in the future in the whole value chain rather than in each technology part. So it is how to make it happen, and Sara most likely can confirm that. To make it happen in an industrial scale, which is needed, will be a challenge. Getting the people on board, training them, and get experience out of real operations.
Thank you. And I'd like to switch to Sara. So when we had a few months ago, we had this breakfast at the Australian Embassy, and Andrew Forrest said, do you think $1 a kilowatt hour for renewable energy is cheap? And he obviously, his assumption is it's not cheap. So what do you at Fortescue see as, well, the targets you're going for in terms of cost, energy cost, and electrolyzer efficiency?
Well, that's a very big question. I mean, ultimately, we want to bring the cost below, I would say, in the first instance, to commercial parity with the fossil fuel equivalents, but then obviously even further below. I think we very much believe that because your inputs are free, once we resolve that initial hurdle, if you will, of getting the development costs down, actually your operating expenses are going to be very low, and that ultimately, this is in terms of both efficiency as well as effectiveness, that renewable hydrogen is going to be much more cost competitive compared to the status quo today, compared to the conventional fuels. I think that what's a little bit unique about Fortescue is that we're breaking the chicken and egg conundrum by being our own first client. And in fact, just what Armin was saying, I mean, the idea of being able to build out these initial projects on our mining, tenements, and getting our teams right to just start working on that learning curve, and effectively getting the systems to start working together on a commercial scale is going to provide us with quite a competitive advantage that we can then start replicating around the world, because we envisage, 4 major production hubs globally. But the idea is to first start at home, really refine, perfect, learn with the contractors. So not just in terms of our own personnel, but obviously working with some of these key OEMs, equipment manufacturers, reviewing this, the systems integration, trying to refine and perfect that, and then being able to sort of export it to our projects globally. But ultimately, I mean, just to answer your question, the idea is to get these costs down as low as possible. And that's where, I mean, Fortescue is quite proud of being, one of the lowest cost operators in the iron ore industry And our objective is to do exactly the same with the green hydrogen industry.
Cornelius, we very often hear miraculous stories about low energy production cost in the Middle East. So you work together with a lot of players on this field. So what is storytelling and what is the reality? Where are we going to come in the next 5 years, perhaps, in terms of cost?
That's a very good question, Holger. Well, first of all, let me say some of the largest solar and wind parks that are operating today in the region. Come here, see everything with your own eyes. It's really incredible. You know, in Dubai, more than 1,000 megawatts, Abu Dhabi, go to Saudi, 400 megawatts wind, go to Egypt, almost 2 gigawatt in Upper Egypt, Morocco, the world's largest solar thermal complex. So there is a significant success story. Of course, everything, you know, is a learning process and things are optimized over time. And I completely agree with Armin that the big challenge is to integrate an extremely complex process, you know, with green molecules. But I don't have any doubt that this will be done. It will be done, and probably, you know, when we look back like 10 or even 5 years ago, nobody, not even the greatest optimist, would have expected that we achieve anything near where we are today. So solar is at 1 to 2 cents in the entire region, wind 1.5 to 3 cents in the entire region. There was even just last week a new wind park, 250 megawatts by Lekela, commissioned in Egypt through the pandemic. So things are happening, and solutions will be found for sure. And I think also very interesting that, as I mentioned, projects like in Helios and Neom, you know, they have a very credible management team, Peter Terum, Roland Kettner, and many people, you know, that have a outstanding track record. And these are commercial projects. So, you know, companies like Neom Aqua Power, they make bold bets, and Air Products just guarantees the offtake for the project. And, you know, they have trust that there will be a market in a few years from now. So to answer your question, obviously 25 is around the corner. Projects, obviously 25, they need to be planned today. But I don't have any doubt that in this decade, probably much more, again, than optimists believe will be achieved, because the ingredients globally are unique. Pressure from the finance sector, you know, no more availability for fossil fuel, pressure of hedge funds to break up national oil companies, listed ones. So, you know, these kind of things, a record low cost, and, you know, a massive pressure to defossilize and to go towards new emissions. I think this is a unique setting compared to where we stand today, to really massively accelerate things. And I don't have any doubt, you know, in this respect, that we come from PowerPoint to power plant very quickly.
Thank you, Cornelius. So you talked about a market in the future, and I would dedicate the last part of our discussion to this market question. So Stijn, it is very obvious wherever in the world you talk about hydrogen, there is always, oh, Port of Rotterdam is here, Port of Rotterdam was here, Port of Rotterdam is having this and so. So obviously you have quite a good overview what is happening globally. So where do you see the new players? Who will be the new players, and how will the incumbents in energy production react? Because the interesting thing about hydrogen is you don't need raw materials under your feet, you need technology, and of course wind and sun. So what is your picture which has been developed over the last 2-3 years? Where are the new players going to be, and which of the old players are going to manage the change into this future?
Thanks, Holger. I first like the comment from PowerPoint to power plant. The other parallel I thought this morning, we changed from NIMBY to please come to Rotterdam, something like that. And the reason I'm saying it is that we currently import 100 million tons per year of crude oil for Northwest Europe. 13% of all of Europe's energy demand comes through Rotterdam. And we want to change it to non-CO2 carrying energy carriers and other feedstocks. And I think, so your question was, who are the new players? Well, Australia obviously is not necessarily a new player, but certainly in this space, because it got people, it got the land, it got the sun, the wind, and it knows how to do big, massive resource projects. We've also been active and talking not only about projects, but also say, how could you trade if hydrogen comes to Europe? How could you make sure that regulatory boundaries get taken away, that what is green is labeled as green and can be sold as green to ThyssenKrupp and to sold to customers of ThyssenKrupp and to customers of Volkswagen, etc. So that whole regulatory chain is also an important one. We've done studies with Iceland, with Uruguay. We announced work together with Chile. So you actually find these new places with Namibia, with Oman, with Brazil. You find all these places that have the ingredients. And it is a mix of, let's say, young and enthusiastic companies, or well-established ones that both, and I see this as an opportunity, as well as a way to survive and to change and to stay with our customers. And then we always say, please come to Rotterdam, because we want to be the energy hub of Europe in the future as well.
Sara, Fortescue is planning not only to produce in Australia, they are planning to produce in Africa and in South America as well. So what is the vision you are following, looking at the globe? Where are those production centers going to be centered in the future, and who are the players you are quite sure you will have a good cooperation with?
Well, I think we do see, when we look at the potential size of the market, right? I mean, Fortescue's, as per my understanding, the most ambitious player in the green hydrogen space, and we've committed 15 million tons by 2030. But if you look at the IEA's, the International Energy Agency's forecast of the amount of green hydrogen we will need to be on a 1.5 degree trajectory by 2030, we actually need closer to 100 million. So we still, the room for growth is massive. And I think that we see, ultimately, as is consistent, I think, with history, we see the renewable energy potential, generation potential of the three southern continents, as well as the fact that they're just simply less densely populated, they're very sparsely populated, as being an opportunity to really grow and develop the green hydrogen industry, as well as, like Stijn was saying, there's just kind of a natural historical experience with developing really large resource projects. So I think we see that three southern continents will ultimately be kind of the powerhouses, if you will, to ultimately deliver into the demand centers in the north, kind of consistent with what happens with a lot of the extractive resources today. I think that in terms of new players, we're going to see perhaps other mining companies like Fortescue really stepping up and making a bit of a change. I mean, ultimately, what's interesting is that we're seeing that some of the energy companies are coming a little bit slow to the game. They do seem to be moving, and we're really encouraged by that. But I think that there's this unique opportunity of companies like Fortescue that also have a huge demand profile, that building their own, kind of complementary green fuel production for that demand just makes a lot of strategic sense. So I think that in terms of de-risking your, decarbonization roadmaps, de-risking your decarbonization strategies, we're going to see a lot of these heavy industrial players like Fortescue stepping up and really kind of growing their own portfolios.
Cornelius, you have a long career in investment banking and financing, and you are now head of a company which of course has partners and supporters who have questions, how is this market going to develop? Perhaps a twofold question. First, a very simple question. Do you think that you can run a global commodity market on color schemes? That's the first question. I think you can answer it with a no, but perhaps three more questions with that. But the second question is, how will we get the off-taker risk done? How, from your financial experience, how can we have those first large-scale investors being accommodated and being enabled to invest. So what is your impression on that?
Yeah, it's a very important question, Holger, because obviously, a solid off-taker makes or breaks both a power or a green hydrogen project. So clearly, we are moving away from colors, both here in the region and in Europe. It is all about a low, no carbon, or I would actually better say a zero or low emission hydrogen. That's clearly the direction. So the challenge is more about certification, and that's really the big prerequisite where we as an organization are working on as well, to align between Europe and the region here to get certification schemes internationally accepted. And we're just in a fact-finding case, what is needed and what is possible. But that's a very, very important prerequisite, to step-by-step develop a tradable market. Now, to your off-taker question, I think we see very interesting movements of big industrial groups. And I can make ThyssenKrupp as an example. ThyssenKrupp recently took a leading role in our organization as well. And, we were already looking at jointly at the big suppliers of green hydrogen in the region. And companies like ThyssenKrupp, they will source 75,000 tons of green hydrogen starting in 25. That's around the corner. And 250,000 tons, 28, 29, when they step-by-step switch from coking coal to DRI technology. And this is just one example. Daimler Truck recently joined. Daimler is talking about something like 300,000 tons in this decade. So these kind of off-takers are today already getting lined up. They are very credible off-takers. And in addition to this, traders and commodity houses are moving in. So, companies like Uniper, and this shows really that there is quite a significant anticipated demand in a few years from now. Of course, we don't know yet about prices. We don't know about the green premium. So that's all open questions. But I think this is very, very powerful. And again, to stress from the financing side, the recent volatility in energy markets, this is really a killer and a further accelerator of the phase out of finance and fossil. Look at what happened to the ammonia price. Really a historic explosion. We are talking about 1,000 per ton. In 25, you could produce green ammonia for less than $500 per ton, and maybe even close to 400, according to our calculations here in the region. And this all together is very, very interesting. And we are in a period of historic liquidity. It's, availability of financing is absolutely not an issue. We have really record liquidity. And the credible off-takers, the sound off-takers, they're actually coming in, which is a very, very good sign.
But for German industry, hydrogen or green molecules and green electricity, it's not only about filling our demand, providing the necessary energy for our production. It's also a question of technology, exporting technology, being a technology leader globally. And I think we have the head of the advisory board of ThyssenKrupp in the room and the CEO of ThyssenKrupp, but they will be on other panels later. But we could ask them, of course, because ThyssenKrupp is exemplifying what this is all about. I mean, they are in desperate need of a lot of green hydrogen in a very short period of time to change their way of producing steel. And on the other hand, they are one of the leading electrolyzer producers globally. And so, Armin, my question to you, how bright do you see the future of German and European technology companies in shaping successfully this, hopefully to be created market for green molecules in the next 10, 15 years?
Holger, difficult to answer. Of course, I cannot judge or comment on ThyssenKrupp's technology or any other, of course. So please bear with me if I focus on Siemens Energy here. And as an engineer and working in academia for many years, I'm quite confident that the European engineers, they will manage this task and these challenges, not only the electrolyzers, but along the whole value chain. I mean, we can do everything. It's all about how fast and at which cost. And I mean, taking Sara's comments on the commitment of producing 15 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030, which is equivalent to approximately 100 to 150 gigawatts of electrolyzer installations in 10 years or less than 10 years, then we are talking about an annual installed base, say, added of 10 to 15 gigawatts, which I do not see right now. I mean, at least not the next years to come. And this is about the projects we are in. We need to learn with the new technology, independent on the part, if you're talking about alkaline or PEM or AEM or high temperature or whatever in the future. I mean, we will have a lot of technical developments, of course, ongoing, but we need to start today, accelerate. I don't see Siemens Energy in the position today that we give, I mean, really big warranties or guarantees, or we go into obligations for 1 gigawatt electrolyzer installations to be operated over 15, 20 or 30 years. I mean, how can we do that? So we need to even come between the operators, say the owners of power-to-X plants, rather than power points, are on a, say, partnership on further developments like Sara is doing in Australia and other way, and we are doing with our partners. It will take time. I'm confident that we will manage it, but it's a long way to go down there. Yeah? So this is, I know about the technology. I know that there are a lot of still challenges we will manage, but a lot of opportunities, especially with the next and the overnext technology phase and generation. We are working on that, and we need to do it, but we need to, and this is what my message should be here, is we should not talk about 2030, 2050 or 2060. We need to make it happen today in order to be ready by 25 and latest 2030. Otherwise, everything will be still announcements and more PowerPoints and more pain in the project execution rather than success.
Thank you, Armin. This was a perfect closing remark to our discussion, as I see 4 zeros and a double point in front of me. So we are over. Thank you. I think what we saw is there is, this is, I mean, it's the inspiring stuff. Apart from all of these problems, where do we get the money from? How do we get the innovations done? The investments done. But this panel, I think, really provided a view on what we're seeing globally. There's a lot of dynamic. There's a lot of will to do things, to change things. But of course, some cautiousness to survive as a flourishing and powerful and wealthy industries. But there is a dynamic, and I thank you very much for being with us today, wherever you are. I think probably Rome, Dubai, and Munich. And thank you all. And now for our listeners, we will go on in the web stream at 12:30 with a discussion on circular economy, Kreislaufwirtschaftspanel um 12:30 Uhr. Für diejenigen hier im Raum gibt es jetzt eine kleine Mittagspause. Vielen Dank.